Kash Patel publishes SOS letter from Diddy's mom. Her court testimony shocks everyone. No one had expected her to resurface. For years, Janice Combs had vanished from the public eye. Whispers said she was sick, mentally unstable, perhaps even dead. But she wasn't dead. She was in a nursing home in Queens, quietly living off a modest Social Security check, surrounded by strangers, forgotten by her famous son. Janice had once been the unwavering supporter of Sean Diddy Combs. She raised him alone after his father's murder, working night shifts and odd jobs to feed him, clothe him, and push him toward a better life. She watched him rise to fame, pride swelling in her chest every time someone called him a genius. But somewhere along the way, pride turned into fear. In 2023, when headlines exploded about lawsuits against Diddy, including one from Cassie, his longtime partner Janice tried to call him. She wanted the truth. Instead, he sent security to her apartment. Within days, she was forcibly committed to a psychiatric facility. "I'm your mother," she screamed as they dragged her out of her home. He never answered, he never visited. Eventually, her condition was stabilized enough to be transferred to a nursing home. Her medical records, doctored by lawyers on her son's payroll, labeled her as delusional, paranoid, emotionally volatile. But Janice wasn't crazy. She was awake. She had seen too much over the years. The girls who came and went from Diddy's parties, the locked rooms, the frightened staff, the strange ledger she once found in his study, a list of names, most of them female, beside coded remarks like handled and pending. She had confronted him more than once. Each time he laughed it off or grew cold. And one day he threatened her. "You don't know what you're playing with," he told her. "You think you can go to the police, you want to end up dead. You know I'm not the top. You don't fuck horse with the top." That was the last time she saw her own son. In the silence of the nursing home, Janice wrote a letter. It was shaky and cursive on 3 crumpled pages of lined paper. She addressed it to someone she had only seen on TV, Kash Patel, the special prosecutor leading the federal investigation into Diddy's criminal network. "Mr. Patel, I am the mother of Sean Combs. I was committed without cause. I have been silenced for years. I want to testify. I know what my son has done. I fear for my life, but I will speak." The letter was sent quietly through a nurse sympathetic to her. Within 2 weeks, a representative from the Department of Justice arrived at the nursing home. They brought a psychiatrist from an independent clinic. They interviewed Janice for 4 hours. She passed every evaluation. She wasn't mentally unstable. She was lucid, clear, determined. When Kash Patel received the report and saw the corroborating details, the names, the timelines, the private conversations, he made a decision that shocked the courtroom weeks later. The day Janice Combs took the stand, the federal courthouse in Manhattan held its breath. She walked slowly, shoulders hunched, but gaze steady. At 83, she moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had waited decades to speak. The moment her name was announced, Diddy froze. His attorneys scrambled. Objections flew. She was declared unfit, one shouted. Patel stood calm, unfazed. "We have a court-authorized psychological evaluation dated last month. She is competent, and we will prove that any documentation to the contrary is forged." The judge reviewed the files. His eyes narrowed. Objection overruled. The witness may proceed. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Diddy looked like he'd seen a ghost. His mother hadn't just reappeared, she'd come with the truth. Janice took her seat, hands trembling only slightly as she was sworn in. She did not look at her son. "Not yet. I raised Sean as a single mother," she began. Her voice, though aged, was steady. "I gave him everything I had. I believed in him. But I see now, I raised a man who believed the rules didn't apply to him, and I helped create that." Tears filled her eyes. She recounted how over the years she had begun to notice patterns, the girls, the threats, the fear in his employees. She recalled one specific night in 2008 when she showed up unannounced at his Miami estate. There was a girl crying. Staff were collecting cell phones. Sean yelled at me, told me never to show up again without calling. She paused. I should have called the police that night. She tried months later. That's when the threats came. He told me there were men above him, powerful men, and that if I talked, they'd find me. Janice sobbed. The courtroom was silent, reverent. Not a murmur, not a click of a pen. Kash Patel stepped forward with a document. This is a forged medical report filed by the defense team, he said. It falsely declares Mrs. Combs as mentally unstable. We have forensic evidence showing it originated from a computer inside the law offices of... He turned toward Diddy's defense table, James Ellison. The judge's eyes narrowed. Within hours, the Bar Association launched an investigation. The forged document had attempted to suppress a witness, an elderly woman, his own mother. By the end of that day, Ellison's license was suspended. He would soon be disbarred for evidence tampering, witness suppression, and human rights violations. But Janice didn't smile. She wasn't here for revenge. She turned finally to her son. I love you, Sean, but I will not protect your sins. Not anymore. Diddy stared down at the table, hands limp. And in that courtroom, the empire of a man who had once ruled the music world began to fracture. The courtroom had never felt colder. As Janice Combs stepped down from the witness stand, her back straight. Despite the tremor in her legs, the silence in the room was complete. She didn't look at anyone, not the judge, not the press, not even her son. But every juror watched her, stunned not just by what she had said, but by the truth she had carried for so long in silence. Outside headlines were already erupting. Diddy's mother testifies against him, claims, threats, forged documents, and abuse of power. Inside, Diddy's team was crumbling. His lead attorney, James Ellison, looked pale and shaken. The forged psychiatric evaluation was no longer just unethical, it was criminal. When the Bar Association confirmed the forgery, Ellison didn't even try to deny it. By the end of that day, his license was officially suspended, pending a formal disbarment hearing. He was escorted from the courthouse, his briefcase still open, papers spilling from the top. Judge Subramanian, stern but composed, addressed the courtroom. This court takes violations of witness rights and forged evidence with the utmost seriousness. The removal of Mr. Ellison does not affect the proceedings. Mr. Combs, you will be assigned new counsel, but this trial moves forward. Diddy said nothing. He didn't even nod. He sat, frozen eyes, glassy, his confidence, the smug mask he had worn throughout the first days of the trial, completely stripped away. That night, Janice returned to her nursing home under federal protection. Reporters swarmed the gates. Security doubled. And inside her room, she sat alone, staring at a framed photo of her son when he was just 7 years old. I raised you to be strong, she whispered, not heartless. The next morning, the trial resumed. Court was packed before dawn. Victims, reporters, activists, and former collaborators all jostled for seats. Many had once benefited from Diddy's empire. Now they came to watch it fall apart. Kash Patel stood calm and confident. He presented a new set of witnesses, former House staff security guards and personal assistants, who had worked in Diddy's homes from 2006 to 2022. Most had signed NDAs. All had broken them to testify. He made us destroy security footage, one house manager said. We weren't allowed to talk to certain girls. We were told to keep our mouths shut and smile, said another. I saw him slap a girl in the hallway because she touched his phone. No one said anything. We were all scared. The jury listened closely. They had already seen the surveillance video of Diddy shoving Cassie in a hotel. Now they heard from people who had lived inside the machine. But the most chilling witness was a quiet man in a gray suit, Nathan Green, a former IT consultant who once managed Diddy's private data servers. I was paid to encrypt and store private recordings, he testified. Footage from parties, personal surveillance, audio from bugged rooms. Patel leaned in. Were these recordings consensual? Nathan hesitated. No, sir, not all of them. The courtroom tensed. Nathan continued. Some of the footage involved intoxicated women, some included physical aggression. Most of it never saw daylight because the people involved were paid to keep quiet. I was told to keep backups on a physical drive locked in a vault in Los Angeles. And who gave that order? Mr. Combs did. A murmur swept through the gallery. One juror leaned forward, hands clasped. Patel moved swiftly, submitting evidence that Nathan had turned over to federal agents hard drives containing encrypted folders, some of which were still being decrypted by forensic teams. Though not all files had been unlocked yet, metadata confirmed the existence of surveillance recordings dating back over 15 years. Back at the defense table, Diddy was a ghost. His new attorneys whispered furiously, but he didn't respond. Then something unexpected happened. During the lunch recess, Diddy asked to speak with the judge. In private, his request was granted. 30 minutes later, court reconvened. Diddy stood slowly and addressed the bench. "I'd like to speak under oath." Gasps rippled across the room. Patel immediately objected. "If Mr. Combs wishes to testify, he must submit to cross-examination." "I understand," Diddy said. "I'm ready." The judge nodded once. "Very well. Mr. Combs, you may take the stand." He did. For the first time in his life, the man who had built a billion-dollar image stood alone, not as a mogul, not as a celebrity, but as a defendant facing the consequences of his own power. His voice was quiet, almost broken. "I've lied for a long time," he began, "to the public, to my team, to myself. But when my mother spoke yesterday," he paused, emotion rising in his throat. "I couldn't lie anymore." He told the court that he had in fact used his power to create a world of silence, where saying no wasn't an option, where consent was manipulated by money status fear. "It wasn't always violent," he said. "Sometimes it was charm, or promises, or opportunities. But when things didn't go my way, there were consequences. People were fired, exiled, threatened." He admitted to orchestrating cover-ups, to paying victims for silence, to hiring lawyers to take care of problems. The courtroom was still. "I created a system where I made the rules, and people either played along or got erased." His words were simple, unpolished, but raw. When Patel rose for cross-examination, he didn't attack. He didn't posture. He simply asked Mr. Combs, "Do you understand that what you've just described fits the legal definition of racketeering, coercion, and sex trafficking?" Diddy nodded. "Yes. And yet, you originally pled not guilty." "I was scared," Diddy said. "But hearing my mother speak the truth made me realize if she has the courage to tell the world what I've done, then I should have the courage to stop hiding." When court recessed that day, no one spoke. Reporters didn't run to tweet. Jurors didn't rush for air. Even the judge looked slightly stunned. It was as if everyone understood something irreversible had happened. The mask was off. And what stood in its place wasn't a star. It was a man stripped bare by truth. The next morning, Manhattan was soaked in rain. Gray clouds hovered low over the courthouse as lines wrapped around the block press protesters, former collaborators, curious onlookers. No one wanted to miss what was coming. Inside, the mood was solemn. A kind of quiet resignation filled the air. Judge Subramanian took the bench. "Mr. Combs," he said, "are you prepared to proceed?" Diddy stood no longer in a tailored designer suit. Just a plain dark jacket, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "Yes, Your Honor. I wish to change my plea." A murmur rippled through the gallery. "What is your plea to the charges of racketeering, coercion, and sex trafficking?" the judge asked. "Guilty," Diddy replied. Just one word. But it hit like thunder. The courtroom remained still. Even Patel, usually composed, blinked once, almost surprised by the sudden collapse of a years-long defense. The judge leaned forward. "Are you making this plea voluntarily and without coercion?" "Yes, sir. No one forced me. This is my decision." "Why now?" the judge asked. Diddy took a breath. His voice cracked. "Because the truth finally matters more than my image. Because my mother spoke up. And because I don't want to hide behind lawyers or NDAs anymore." I want to face what I've done." In the hours that followed, the dominoes began to fall. Kash Patel, stepping outside the courthouse for a brief press statement, spoke plainly. "This is not just a legal victory, it's a cultural reckoning. For too long, power has shielded abuse. Today, we begin to strip that shield away." Inside the courtroom, sentencing was set for 6 weeks later. Diddy was remanded to federal custody until then. He would not walk out of the building a free man. As he was led away in handcuffs, he glanced toward the front row, toward the empty seat where his mother had sat. She had come that morning. She had watched his plea, but she had left quietly before the press descended. By midday, the music industry was in shock. Record labels issued rapid-fire statements distancing themselves from Diddy's legacy. Bad Boy Records' digital footprint was immediately altered. Streaming services began pulling his catalog from featured playlists. Brands that had once embraced his charisma now buried his name beneath legal disclaimers. But something deeper was unraveling. Producers, executives, artists, assistants. People who had operated inside Diddy's world, some knowingly, others passively, began reevaluating everything they had seen and ignored. One anonymous executive told a journalist, "We always heard rumors. We joked about his parties. We knew NDAs were being signed, but no one asked too many questions. Because he was Diddy, untouchable, that illusion had shattered. More victims came forward, women who had remained silent for years, former employees who had left the industry entirely. Even a few public figures admitted they had suspicions but were afraid to speak." Social media, usually a battleground of polarizing opinion, found a rare consensus. Power had protected him. Silence had enabled him. But truth spoken through a mother had finally stopped him. Back in Queens, Janice Combs sat by her window. Reporters kept calling, but she didn't answer. Lawyers offered interviews, book deals, exclusive rights. She declined them all. She hadn't testified for money or fame. She testified for the women who couldn't, for her son's soul, and for the person she once believed he could be. A nurse brought her tea. The same nurse who had helped mail that first letter to Kash Patel. "He did it," the nurse said gently. "He confessed." Janice didn't smile. She just nodded. "Then maybe now, there's a chance for something real to begin." The courtroom may have gone quiet, but the world outside had erupted. Within 48 hours of Diddy's guilty plea, over a dozen new statements surfaced. Former employees, party guests, artists, even a few minor celebrities. Many told similar stories: coercion, manipulation, cover-ups, NDAs signed in fear rather than consent. Some shared names, some shared details, some shared recordings. Suddenly, Diddy's empire wasn't just crumbling, it was detonating from within. Documentaries were announced. Investigations expanded. Congressional subcommittees hinted at hearings on entertainment industry abuse. The Department of Justice began examining whether Diddy's network connected to others. This wasn't just one man's fall. It was the unraveling of an entire system built on silence and profit. Inside the industry, panic set in. Music labels began auditing past artist contracts. Private security firms received subpoenas. Talent agencies issued internal memos warning staff not to destroy records. Several top executives who had been photographed at Diddy's private parties took sudden leaves of absence. But the most damning evidence came from within Diddy's inner circle. An anonymous whistleblower from his own management team leaked years of encrypted emails. One message dated 2019 read, "Janice is asking questions again. If she calls the press, we'll have to institutionalize her again. Same as Miami. Keep her off the radar." It confirmed what Janice had testified. She wasn't crazy. She had been made invisible. Janice watched it unfold from her nursing home now, under constant security. She no longer felt fear, only grief. Grief for what she had allowed. For the years she had tried to justify her son's behavior. He had been so charming as a child, so hungry for success. But something had broken in him, something she didn't see until it was too late. She sat in her small room, letters pouring in from strangers. Some were from victims. You gave me the courage to speak. Others from mothers. You reminded me what real love means. And a few from haters too, accusing her of betrayal, calling her a liar. But they didn't matter. She had told the truth. That was enough. Meanwhile, Diddy remained in custody, held in a secure federal facility. He was no longer referred to as Mr. Combs by guards. Just inmate 104287. His cell was clean, his meals plain. No designer sheets, no entourage, no VIP passes. He requested to see his mother. She declined. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. He needs to sit with the weight of what he did, she told her nurse. I'll visit him after sentencing, not before. The sentencing hearing loomed. Across media outlets, commentators speculated on the sentence length. Legal experts debated whether Diddy's late admission would reduce time. Victims demanded the maximum penalty, but Janice didn't care about the years. She cared about the acknowledgement. The moment her son stopped being a brand and became a man facing justice. On the day before sentencing, Kash Patel gave a televised interview. He looked tired but resolute. This case isn't about celebrity, it's about accountability. It's about every victim who was told their pain didn't matter, because the person who hurt them was famous. When asked about Janice Combs, his expression softened. She didn't just help this case, she changed it. A mother who refused to stay silent. In my career, I've never seen anything like it. That night, Janice couldn't sleep. The rain returned soft against the window. She sat alone in her room, holding a letter she had written but never sent. It was addressed to Sean. I'm not proud of you, but I'm proud of what you did in that courtroom. Not the crimes, the truth. You broke something inside me when you turned your back on me. But I broke too when I pretended I didn't see what you'd become. We both have to live with that. But maybe now we can begin again. Not as mother and mogul, just as people. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Tomorrow she would sit in the front row, and she would watch the system her son built finally hold him accountable. The courtroom was packed. Rows of seats filled with survivors, activists, press, and members of the public who had waited for hours just to get in. Security was tight. Tension hung heavy in the air. It was sentencing day. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Judge Arun Subramanian entered and called the session to order. Diddy, now simply inmate Sean Combs, was brought in through a side door. He looked thinner, tired, still wearing the same plain suit. But this time his eyes searched the room, and when they landed on the front row, he stopped. Janice Combs was there. She didn't smile, she didn't nod, but she met his gaze, firm, steady, present. He blinked and looked down. The prosecution began with a formal statement, summarizing the charges and the impact. Then came the victim impact statements, the heart of the day. One by one, women took the stand. Their voices trembled, then steadied. Each painted a picture of what Diddy's power had cost them. Cassie, the most well-known accuser, spoke first. He told me I owed him my silence, that my career, my image, my access to the industry, he controlled all of it. I thought that if I just kept quiet, I could survive it. But silence is its own kind of prison. She paused. Today I want to reclaim my name. I am not a rumor. I am not a situation. I am a survivor. And she looked at Diddy as no longer untouchable. Another woman who had never gone public before told her story through tears. He made me believe it was my fault, that I was too emotional, too dramatic, but I was just scared. I lost years of my life to trauma. I don't want revenge. I want peace. A third woman described being paid to disappear. I signed an NDA when I was 22. I thought I was protecting myself, but really I was protecting him. I've lived with shame for a decade, no more. Several court observers cried. Even some jurors from the original panel released, after the guilty plea returned to listen. Their faces were solemn. Every voice that rose against Diddy chipped away at the myth of his invincibility. Then it was Janice Combs's turn. She hadn't planned to speak, but as she rose, the entire room leaned forward. "I am not here as a mother trying to defend her child," she began. "I am here as a mother who failed to see the truth until it was too late." Her voice trembled. "I loved my son. I still do. But love is not covering up someone's darkness. It's calling it out. My silence made me complicit, and for that I am truly sorry." She looked at the victims. "I thank you for having the courage to speak, for breaking what I couldn't. And then to her son Sean, you broke something sacred, and now you must rebuild from the ground." Diddy was offered a chance to speak before sentencing. He stood slowly glancing once more at Janice before facing the judge. "I listened to every word he said. I wrote apologies in my cell 100 times, but they always felt hollow, because I don't think any words can undo what I've done." He looked at the women who had testified. "I thought I was powerful. I thought I could control the narrative. I created a world where my will was law. But it was a lie. My empire was built on fear, not respect." A long pause. "To the women I hurt, I can't ask for forgiveness, but I promise to never deny what I did. Not again. Not ever." He sat down, and silence followed. Judge Subramanian addressed the court. "This case is not just about wealth or fame or influence. It's about choice. Mr. Combs chose again and again to abuse his power, to silence victims, to corrupt legal processes, to violate the dignity of others." He turned to Diddy. "You were not judged for being famous. You were judged for what you did." Then he delivered the sentence for the charges of racketeering, coercion, sex trafficking, and obstruction of justice. "This court sentences you to 32 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 20 years. Gasps erupted. Some cried. Others applauded. Diddy closed his eyes, then nodded once, almost like he'd expected it. As he was led away, he looked toward his mother one last time. She stood still, and for a moment, brief quiet, he mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." She didn't reply, but her eyes, though glassy with tears, stayed on him until the courtroom door closed behind him. Then she turned, took her coat, and walked out head high. Outside, the press swarmed. Janice said nothing. She simply placed her hand over her heart, then disappeared into the waiting car. The era of Diddy had ended, but something more important had begun, an era where even giants could fall, and where a mother's voice, once silenced, could reshape the fate of an empire. 6 weeks had passed since the sentencing. The headlines had slowed, the crowds had dispersed, but the impact had not faded. Diddy Sean Combs was now an inmate in a federal facility in Colorado. Far from the flashing lights of the music world he once ruled. No recording studio, no assistants, just time, time to think, time to reckon. He requested books on psychology, on restorative justice. He began attending group therapy, not for show, but because, for the first time in his life, no performance could protect him. He was no longer a brand, just a man behind bars. In Queens, Janice Combs moved into a quiet apartment sponsored by a victims' rights organization. They had offered her full protection, but she declined security. "I've lived too many years in fear," she said. "I'm not afraid anymore." She began writing. Not a memoir, something gentler, letters, notes, reflections. One by one, she began responding to the hundreds of letters she had received. Some days she smiled, some days she wept. But every day she spoke the truth. The ripple effect spread far beyond New York. Record labels began adopting new artist conduct clauses. Major talent agencies created independent oversight committees. Entertainment law schools began including modules on abuse of power and survivor advocacy. And for once, it didn't feel performative. It felt different, real. Because it wasn't driven by scandal. It was driven by a mother who had nothing left to lose except her silence. In Washington, Kash Patel testified before a congressional subcommittee on power abuse, within the entertainment industry. When asked what broke the case open, he didn't hesitate. Her name is Janice Combs. She didn't come with an agenda, she came with her truth, and she never blinked. Months later, Diddy sent his mother a letter. It was handwritten. No lawyers, no handlers. I don't know what redemption looks like. Maybe I don't deserve it. But if there's any part of me left worth saving, it's because of you. Thank you for not giving up on the truth. I love you. She kept it in a box beside her bed. Not as forgiveness, not yet, but as proof that even the darkest stories can still carry a spark of light. The world moved on. New artists rose, new scandals surfaced, but something fundamental had shifted. No one was too big to fall, and no silence was too small to matter. As Janice sat by her window, the sun broke through the morning fog. She poured tea, she picked up her pen, and she began writing the truth again, this time for the next generation,